On October 1, 1960, Nigeria was the world's sweetheart. We weren't just another colony gaining independence. We were the giant of Africa. We had a booming agricultural sector, groundnut pyramids in the north, cocoa in the west, palm oil in the east. We had a British-style parliament and an army that was the pride of the continent. But those celebrations masked a structural nightmare. The British had merged hundreds of ethnicities into three massive regions which were the north, the west, and the east. It was a tripod system. In theory, a tripod is stable, but in practice, if one leg grows an inch longer than the others, the whole thing collapses. By 1962, the honeymoon for amalgamation was over. Now the regional leaders weren't just political rivals, they were ethnic champions. Power at the center, in Lagos, was the ultimate prize. If your tribe didn't control the federal government, you felt like a second-class citizen in your own country. Suspicion became the national language. The first cracks in the nation appeared in the 1962 census. Why does a census matter? Well, because population equals seats in parliament. When the numbers from the census came out, the North had more people than the South combined. The South screamed fraud. The North tried to defend themselves. And just like that, the trust was gone before the first shot was ever fired. Now, if you want to understand why young soldiers felt they had to kill their leaders, you have to understand the wild, wild West. In the Western region, a bitter feud broke out between Chief Obafemi Awolowo and his deputy, Samuel Laddock Akintola. Akintola wanted to align with the Northern NPC to get a slice of the national cake. Awolowo refused. The region split in two. Awolowo ended up in prison for treasonable felony, and Akintola took the premiership. Then came the 1965 Western regional election. It wasn't an election. It was a war. Ballot boxes were stuffed. Electoral officers were kidnapped. When the official results declared Akintola the winner, the streets exploded. They called it Operation Weti. In Yoruba, Weti means douse it. Mobs would stop cars on the road. They'd ask, Awolowo or Akintola? If you answered wrong, or if you had the wrong political sticker, they would pour petrol on you and your car. They would strike a match and walk away. Over 2,000 people died. Law and order vanished. The police were overwhelmed, and the federal government in Lagos seemed to be looking the other way, or worse, protecting the winners. For the young officers in the barracks, watching their country burn was too much to bear. Then came the five majors. Most were in their late 20s or early 30s. They were the Sandhurst generation, trained by the British, polished, and deeply nationalistic. To them, the politicians were 10%ers, men who took a 10% bribe on every government contract while the people starved. Their leader was Major Patrick Chukwuma Kaduna Nzeogwu. He was a fascinating contradiction. An Igbo man, but he grew up in the north. He spoke Hausa better than many northerners. He was a man of high morals. He didn't drink, he didn't smoke, and he hated the lavish parties of the Lagos elite. They began to meet in secret. The plan was code-named Exercise Demisa the Leopard. They weren't planning a simple protest. They were planning a surgical strike. They would remove the head of the country to save the body. But there was a flaw in their plan, one that would haunt Nigeria for 60 years. While their intent was nationalist, their composition was almost entirely Igbo. In a country as sensitive as Nigeria, who pulls the trigger matters as much as who dies. January 15, 1966. 2 a.m. While the rest of the country slept, the leopard struck. In Kaduna, Nzeogwu led a group of soldiers to the Nasarawa Lodge, the home of the Sardauna of Sokoto, Ahmadu Bello. They blew the gate open with an anti-tank gun. The Sardauna, a man who commanded the loyalty of millions, faced his end with dignity. He was killed alongside his wife. In Ibadan, Akintola, the man at the center of the Weti fire, didn't go quietly. He engaged the soldiers in a gunfight before he was finally overwhelmed. Narrator. In Lagos, the Prime Minister, Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, was taken from his bed. He was a man known for his humility and his golden voice. For days, the nation didn't know where he was. Eventually, his body was found by a roadside. But as the sun rose, the plot began to fail. In Lagos, the army's most senior officer, Major General Johnson Aguiyi-Ironsi, managed to escape the net. He didn't join the coup, he fought back. He rallied the troops and forced the majors to surrender or flee. By the afternoon of January 15th, the revolution was over, but the government was dead. The military, led by Ironsi, took power to restore order. The tragedy of January 15th wasn't just the deaths. It was the math that followed. The North looked at the list of the dead: the Prime Minister, Northerner; the Sardauna, Northerner; Akintola, Westerner; Maimalari, Northern General. Then they looked at the list of the survivors. Almost every Igbo political and military leader was still alive. To the North, this wasn't a patriotic correction. It was an ethnic cleansing. When General Ironsi, an Igbo man, took over and failed to prosecute the majors, treating them more like detainees than assassins, the suspicion turned to rage. When he abolished the regions and made Nigeria a unitary state, the North saw it as a final takeover. The giant of Africa didn't just stumble, it broke. 6 months later, a counter-coup would drench the country in more blood. A year later, the Biafran War would begin. The young majors thought bullets could fix corruption. They thought violence could force unity. But Nigeria learned a lesson that night that we are still trying to understand today. You cannot build a peaceful nation on a foundation of blood.